Hello everybody and welcome to our next topic in the GW ordained Age of Piracy. One of my recent videos I talked about the noble Eldar Corsairs and the wonderful doomed Prince Uriel, truly the brightest star in the galaxy besides maybe the returned Primarchs. However, today is no such day, as we are going to be talking about the complete opposite. A man and his followers who are such a blight upon the galaxy that the Imperium, if they ever found them, would spare no expense to absolutely delete them from the face of the universe. Definitely on the Imperium's top wanted list and has a real claim to probably a top 5 or maybe even a top 3. While Uriel burns like a bright star, Huron Blackheart and his Red Corsairs are like the maelstrom of darkness that he used to guard. Let's talk about the Red Corsairs and more space piracy. Piracy in 40k is basically everywhere, and to much of those within the galaxy it is a core part of survival and expansion. Rogue traders and planetary governors might both hire pirates or even become pirates themselves in order to destabilize rivals or even territories where they have their interest. And of course, there are several renegade Space Marine warbands who have allied forces both mortal and immortal alike. Unlike the disciplined Imperial Navy and Xenos Corsair like Eldar and Orc freebooters, and don't worry, we will be getting to the Orcs, Chaos Piracy are made up of a mix between brutal raiding for resources and vengeance against the Imperium, and even for some members of the warband, they use it as a way to express their faith in the ruinous powers. Many people do not realize just how much resources that a warband needs in the universe of 40k, and being without the Imperial war machine is essentially being forced into a downward death spiral where every member of your warband struggles and flounders every single day. Without stable forge wealth, ties and supply lines, such a group who they would basically be without fuel, ammo, repairs, labor, slaves, and even let's just focus upon it being a Space Marine renegade group, gene seed to make more. I mean, just imagine the amount of labor that goes into keeping a single suit of power armor functional. Ceramite and adamantium has to be mined and forged for small-time repairs or even large-time repairs. Circuits has to be fixed and tested after any high-impact attacks. And there are a lot of times where the machine spirit or software, as we know that it is, or is it, that might go haywire and has to be appeased from time to time. This alone requires an entire network of experts, and that is just to keep one Marine operational and his portion of the warband operational. I mean, you have to consider the bare necessities of life, as anything besides from a full daemon of the warp requires food, clothes, warmth, and a place to rest, all while on a ship that are in various states of disrepair. And you might not even have the know-how to fix it, or if you do, you might need the hyper-specific parts in order to fix the heat sinks for a plasma generator, or even such an important things as the air circulation. I mean, there are Imperial ships that are mostly lit by candlelight due to nobody understanding how the looming technologies works, and it is quite commonplace that melter torpedoes and other ship-wide weaponry has to be manually loaded because the automatic loader has not worked for hundreds of years. And that is Imperial examples. They do have access to an entire support network, and their ships in many circumstances are what we would consider barely functional. Pirate warbands have to sustain themselves through hit-and-run void raids, boarding actions, and conquest from hidden points, either inside of Imperial space or around turbulent sectors of space, such as the Eye of Terror, the Screen Vortex, or the Maelstrom. The Maelstrom is the seat of power for the warband known as the Red Corsairs, a faction of chaos-oriented pirates who probably at this point is nearing Legion scale in how massive their pirate empire is. While other chaos forces operate on small scale, most of them follow a pretty similar principle. Emerge from the warp, drift as close as you can to your target before being noticed, and strike only weak targets such as shipping lanes, outposts, or isolated worlds, and then, in the best pirate fashion, grab everything that is not nailed down and run away laughing before reinforcements arrive. But just imagine being a captain for such a force. You have managed to actually overcome the Imperial target, and now you stand to reap the booty. But you have limited space in your ship, so what do you prioritize? Food and ammo that will keep you going for a while longer, but you know that will eventually run out, or valuable treasure that you might stow at a later point. However, remember, one cannot eat or fire gold and rare earth minerals. As mentioned before, the only places where pirates have any chance of creating a life for themselves that is not utter misery is around turbulent space and warp rifts, and kings amongst these stands the Maelstrom. And absolutely, we can't begin to fathom how big this continuous warp real space overlap is. It's found inside of the Ultima Segmentum, which basically means that in this relatively civilized part of the universe, there is... I can't even begin to describe how big this thing is. Listen, it's big, it's ongoing, it's where the warp basically influences our real universe, creating places where rules of gravity and rules of reality becomes really, really wonky, and therefore is a perfect place for any non-imperial forces. This place is the realm of the Red Corsairs. This place is the realm for the Red Corsairs, and in this place somewhere lies their capital of New Badab. Or amongst Imperials, it is known as the Skull Planet. And yes, GW is very original here, with pirates being on a secret planet or island that has a skull motif to it. Subtlety, something is a literary tool. But anyways, let's continue. It is a grim world that has been shaped into a fortified pirate stronghold after the Badab War, where the Astral Claws fell and became these renegades. New Badab features the Palace of Thorns, a vast thorn-wreathed fortress echoing Huron Blackheart's former seat of power on the original Badab. Throughout the ages, this place has managed to surround itself with orbital defense batteries, both from the honored past as the Astral Claws and Wardens of the Maelstrom, but also improvised platforms that are basically ships that have been dragged into orbit and has become sentry batteries. The planet is ruled by Huron and his inner circle, and is a relative safe haven for anybody not aligned with the Imperium of mankind, be it throngs of mutant, chaos fanatics, rogue traders walking a razor's edge, or terrible Xenos that have survived the genocides of humanity. For all its power, military might, and presence, this planet's main advantage in not being destroyed, is having its location unknown to the Imperium, as if mankind ever became certain to its whereabouts, they would spare no expense to finally be rid of the Pirate King for good. And try as he might, Huron has before gone toe-to-toe with the Imperium and came out worse for wear on the other side. And unlike many Chaos Lords, Huron Blackheart is way too smart to repeat that mistake. The Red Corsair has an additional famous location known as Hell's Iris, a captured Vermilion-class star fort, formerly known as Canaan's Eye, are orbiting a corrupted world known as Rukal within the Maelstrom. This massive, ramshackle space station is barely kept together except by the constant flow of resources to and from it, and it functions as a multi-purpose outpost, a forward operating base and a black market hub for mercenaries and renegades, even a repair yard for any fleet that has the money and the tribute to get a hold of their services. But deep within this facility lies something quite special, a critical facility where gene seed operations can be conducted on recruits. Lord Apothecary Garon, with the wonderful title as Corpse Master, trots around this base and conduct his terrible business, using its apothecarian base to implant the graded gene seed of the astral claws and stolen gene seed into surviving aspirants, despite failure rates that are so hard that they're bordering on madness. The station's dock teem with mortal reavers, mutant laborers, and allied Xenos, making it the most varied place in the universe, maybe beside from a Tau Sept world, and I would have said Komorak, but that's not really in our universe. If you look further into the station, you will find its ancient forges, turning out munitions and refitting looted ship under the Forge Master Amorous Velfex's oversight. Those who come here for any reason, being to be a visitor, a merchant captain, and anything else, must understand that this is not a place of safety, and as a minimum, paying tribute in the name of the Huron Blackheart is required, and even still, opportunistic pirates navigate its blood-red corridors looking for any chance for additional plunder. When all of it is said and done, this is the place for freedom-seeking captains to trade supplies amid the constant hum of arc welders and the stink of promethium and distant scream from lower slave decks. While this is the largest and most powerful one, the Red Corsairs contain countless smaller strongholds scattered across the maelstrom, hidden within asteroid bases, derelict space hulk, repurposed as lairs or fortified outposts on fringe worlds or even closer to Imperial space. This inherent refuge is why Chaos Piracy endures beyond the Eye of Terror. Imperial Astrocataphorus, yes, I managed to say it, label these regions off limits or lost to the warp, granting forces like the Red Corsair precious time to repair hulls, recruit defectors and slaves, implant gene seeds, forge alliances, and plot the next raid. In the Maelstrom, the Corsairs have built a true pirate empire, legion in numbers and sustained by plunder and pragmatism rather than blind devotion to the dark gods. Taking a short break from the men on the Huron, as they are all both the exception and the poster boy of a renegade marine, let's have a look at a Chaos pirate fleet. And while the very idea of defining this seems pointless, it can be most of the time coupled together in one word: ragtag. A successful pirate fleet find themselves becoming a mix of captured Imperial vessels, defective civilian ships, and in very rare cases Xenos ships at prices. If such a chaos fleet is one that has a reason to be devoted to any god, very soon these hulls would also start showing chaos corruption. Such an armada would emphasize versatility for hit-and-run piracy, boarding actions, and overwhelming smaller convoys and isolated outposts, with maybe a heavy capital ship surrounded by swarms of escort craft, all piloted by mortal crew auxiliaries. Within the Maelstrom, there are quite a number of named ships, as this really is one of the major places where a lot of the action in the universe takes place. There is Huron's own personal flagship, the Spectre of Ruin. There is also the very fact that in order for Abaddon, the current War Master, if you would think that he's a threat, he had to buy off Huron, either throughout what I'd like to think is realizing that Huron is actually capable of usurping him. He chose to buy off Lord Huron with a Blackstone fortress, which luckily to everyone that is not aligned with Chaos was contested and eventually lost. There's also a lot of really grand ships, such as the Midnight Solitude, Nightmare's Dawn, and Hope's Sunset, which are all Executioner-class grand cruisers. To those who don't know, these are some really big boats. I mean, big ones that can go toe-to-toe with anything of their own size, and even something bigger than that. These cruisers, these grand cruisers, have so much firepower that they pose a threat to basically anything. And there has even been a Gothic-class cruiser that has been within the service of Huron Blackheart. And just to put that into perspective, the Gothic-class cruiser is, I believe there was made either 13 or under 50 of them in the entire setting, and the Emperor's own personal flagship was of this class. So just saying, big boat, big guns, big everything. Huron and his men, and a lot of KR captains, they even have a bit of a sense of humor and like to keep the names of the original just to piss off the Imperium. Meaning that, for example, a pretty famous strike cruiser is called the Wolf Fenris, and as you might guess, it was captured from the Space Wolves. The fall of the Astral Claw is not an untypical story if you view how the Imperium works. Basically, the chapter is believed to have been created by the 10th founding, through some records conflicted and place it a bit later. The gene seed is currently unknown, but there are a lot of theories that are pointing towards either a mix, meaning there would be a chimeric chapter, which I don't really like, but it seems like they would either be Dark Angels or Ultramarines, as they have a lot of iconography that is definitely shaped by these two. From the beginning, the Astral Claw's sole purpose was to stand watch over the Maelstrom. This absolutely, as I mentioned before, horrid piece of space where chaos and Xenos raid and piracy was constant. But understand me correctly here, the Maelstrom is also a place where you can find absolutely unique resources that doesn't exist anywhere else in the entire galaxy. So this is also a really, really valuable place, which means that the Imperium wants it. Anyways, they were given a planet which they would use as their bastion, and from here throughout the centuries they would be fortifying the system, building a fleet, and making a really, really competent force to patrol this area. However, the turning point came with the election of Lord Huron, as he was called back then, when he became chapter master, the youngest in the chapter's history. Following a failed coup on their homeworld, Huron personally crushed the rebellion and declared himself to be planetary governor, adopting the wonderful title of Tyrant of Badab. And under Huron, the Astral Claw reached the height of their power. They secretly absorbed the remnants of a long-lost chapter known as the Tiger Claws, and illegally expanded the number of Marines that they were allowed to hold. There aren't specific numbers, but let's say that they were full strength, which means that they would be 1,000 Marines. If they were then to absorb another chapter, that would either mean that they would become 2,000, or as we should probably assume that the Tiger Claws were not full strength at the time, let's say that they were down to a third. That would mean that Lord Huron now commanded about 1,300 or 1,500 battle brothers. They also maintained, as I mentioned before, massive fleets of PDF forces and effectively ruling much of the Maelstrom as like his semi-autonomous domain. And Huron repeatedly petitioned the Imperium for either greater resources and greater autonomy, arguing that the chapter was bleeding itself dry holding on to the Maelstrom alone, while the Imperium just increased tithe after tithe, because the Imperium has a absolutely stupid idea that if you manage to meet your tithe, that means that they increase the tithe next time, and then they keep on doing that until they can squeeze the absolutely last amount of resource out of you to the absolute maximum, and that might piss off a few people, including Lord Huron. Tensions really escalated when Huron decided to withhold the tithe and even destroyed an imperial investigation field looking into these problems, and that it became known how many Marines that was actually in active duty. Having been pressured for too long by the Imperium, Huron issued the Article of Just Secession, calling upon old alliances forged with the Lamentas, Mantis warriors, and executioners to protect the Astartes' right of autonomy from imperial bureaucracy, nobility, and the Inquisition. I will go into all of that at some point in some video, but basically the Space Marines operate separate from the Imperium of Man. It's quite complicated and there's a lot of story there, but basically humans technically have no say over what a Space Marine wants to do. Anyways, the Imperium in turn responded with a massive task force, including the Firehawks, Red Scorpions, Minotaurs, and the Star Phantoms. And in the middle of this entire thing, the Carcharodons decided to show up, which, if you know anything about the Space Sharks, you know that it got bad. The war culminated at a palace of fawns on Bada Primaris. Here it looked like the Imperials were finally held back due to the vast defensive network constructed here. But in the middle of all of this chaos, Huron was critically wounded by taking a melter ray directly to the side of his body. And despite him wearing Terminator armor and trying to deflect the attack with power claws, one must remember that a melter weapon is made for taking out tanks. Less than 200 Astral Claws managed to flee this combat, and they brought their main master along deep into the Maelstrom, where they would use their superior knowledge of the sector to disappear from Imperial reach. The Allied chapter received penitent crusades, as the Inquisition declared that these Space Marines were victims of subterfuge and manipulation, and showed no sign of any corruption besides having faith in the word of their brothers. Huron was rebuilt by Lord Apothecary Garen and Forge Master Amenus Valfex, using extensive bionics and dark arts. And while lingering near death, he struck a bargain with an unknown warp power for a chance to regain what is his, the Maelstrom. Now followed around by a demonic familiar to remind him of his oath, he renamed himself Huron Blackheart, Master of the Maelstrom, and his remaining forces became the warband, the Red Corsairs, named for the blood-red paint they now choose to clad themselves in. There are many key figures within these forces that are really interesting, and I've already mentioned a few of them. There are, of course, Blackheart himself, a man so dangerous, smart, and pragmatic that he is basically a threat to anyone, even other Chaos forces. Again, in my own little canon, he's probably one of the men that Abaddon fears the most, because a Black Crusade led by Huron rather than Abaddon might actually get things done. Then there is the man who I struggle with pronunciation and probably said different a few times during this video, Amenus Valfex, the Forge Master or the Alchemaster, the honored patriarch of the forces, of the Forges, and Huron's personal armorer. Garen the Corpse Master or the Lord Apothecary, the former chief apothecary of the Astral Claws, meaning that he has been with Huron since the very beginning. And then of course there's his personal sorcerer lord, Garlon Soul Eater, who is doing all manner of dark and terrible things, because Huron understands something, and that is delegations. You delegate work to competent people around you, and that has actually protected him from a surprising amount of chaos corruption. The Tithe Hauler plowed through the void near the Maelstrom's edge, its massive prow harrowed by small collision with debris throughout the ages. It holds heavy with promethium and munitions meant for its tour around 3 major battlefronts. Its 2 Cobra escorts flanked it like loyal hounds. Then the warp tore open. A Crimson Strike cruiser exploded into real space, macro cannons firing almost before it had left the Immaterium. The escort was caught in its warp emergence and was turned into balls of flame as their void shield burst from warp pressure. Alarms screeched across the hauler, and all the Vox channels exploded with a deep bellowing voice filled with hate and thunder. "Your Emperor's a rotting corpse. Surrender your ship or we will drink in your screams." Captain Lyrian Voss rallied his armaments. "To the breach points, for the throne!" But it was too late. Boarding torpedoes punched through the hull like iron fist, and the first wave hit the engineerium. Last fire landed from the desperate armsmen, and a ragtag team of Reaver charged throughout the crossfire, chain blades howling and heretical shouts flowing. Within seconds, the plasma reactor fell silent under Crimson boots. No self-destruct, no escape, and the second wave tore into the cargo decks. More Reavers and terrible combat-equipped servitors, hundreds of them, poured from the assault rams. Armsmen's barricades shattered under boulder volleys and las guns. They snapped ineffectively against the tide, and a young sergeant swung his power maul as it was caught mid-swing and probably ripped off by a giant in terrible crimson armor. Colonists and Stratum personnel screamed as they were dragged away in chains, never to see the light of the stars again. Such is the fate of many who would dare impose upon the realm of the master of the Maelstrom. Thank you so much for listening to this. Let me know what you liked and consider giving it a like or subscribe. Until next time, I'll see you in another story and another video about space pirates. Bye bye.